I started to make these fantasy watercolor videos in May this year before summer, and it was only meant to be a little side project. But now I've done nearly 100 mini fantasy maps, which, if you think about it, is a little bit bonkers. This is going to be my last video in this series, but I'm hoping to continue painting fantasy maps and making videos, which I will talk a little bit more about towards the end of this video. I will also show you some pictures from my local art shop, which is called Broad Canvas, and it is located here in Oxford. The shop owners were very kind and they let me film their lovely shop, and the people working there were super friendly. In addition to new watercolor brushes, I also bought a dip pen and ink, and this is the first time I'm using these type of art supplies. It is harder than it looks like, but I love the feeling and control that it gives me. And as a bonus, I can embrace my inner Victorian gentlelady and pretend to be a cartographer from the old world. If you are drawing a fantasy map, I would strongly recommend adding a coastal line somewhere. This becomes a natural border, but it also gives a feeling that your fantasy world is much larger, because who knows what's on the other side of the ocean. In my previous video about wetlands and world building, I talked a little bit about how I figured out how to paint coastal lines with watercolors. First, I paint a layer of rather saturated paint along the coast before I add a generous amount of water next to the colors and then let them blend and mix naturally. This creates a type of unpredictable color blooms that I really like, and which gives it an interesting and loose color gradient. Last week I went into Oxford and visited the local art shop Broad Canvas. It is a lovely little independent shop with a surprisingly large amount of art supplies for beginners like me to advanced artists. I needed new watercolor brushes, but I ended up buying a dip pen and 2 types of ink after I talked to the friendly shop assistants. If you have the possibility, I would recommend that you always buy your art supplies from a physical store. Not only are you supporting local shops, but the people working there are often very knowledgeable and can help you with recommendations. Plus, you become a part of the art community. The ink has a low viscosity, so naturally I got some paint on my fingers. Drawing and writing with a dip pen and ink is highly satisfying because you get a nice line variety depending on how hard you press. The blue ink that I'm using from Winsor & Newton bleeds a little, but I figured out that I can use that to my advantage by adding clean water and letting it dilute the ink slightly. If you are writing or planning a D&D adventure or an adventure for other 5e systems, there are plenty of monsters to choose from that live near the coast. Pirates, water elementals and dragon turtles all live near the coast, while under the surface lurks sharks, killer whales and the legendary kraken monster. Bronze dragons also prefer coastal habitats, and although they are good in alignment, they might not tolerate trespassers who are seeking to steal their treasure. Coasts are also excellent regions to set ship-based adventures where you can use the ocean to your advantage. Stormy weather on a rolling ship with thunder and lightning might make the otherwise so huffy and puffy paladin vary. As a DM, you could casually ask if they are still wearing their heavy metal armor, and if they say yes, just make a neutral comment and roll a couple of dice behind the DM screen to keep them on their toes. These are the final illustrations that I made using a dip pen, 2 types of ink and watercolors. I tried both the hot pressed watercolor paper and cold pressed paper. I really like the way the watercolor behave on the more uneven cold pressed paper. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is the last video in this series that I started in May before the summer. It was only meant to be a small side project, but because of the kind comments that people wrote to me, I continue to make new videos where I have shared my attempts to become a better fantasy map maker. Although this series is ending, I'm hoping to start a new project next week where I will draw a fantasy map for our upcoming book Murder at the Old Wolf Inn, which is set in Eastern Faroe. I hope I will see you soon again and that you will have a wonderful and creative day.